Hey guys, I love to read and I almost always have some books that I'm doing, but I have to say this year has not been awesome for me as far as books go. That I have spent a lot of time thinking I'll get to it, or as soon as the kids are set up in this math program or in this new high school thing that they're doing, and I've just really put off my own education this year, and I have really experienced a lot of struggles around that because for me, learning is more than just a to-do list. It's something that brings a lot of excitement and a lot of life into everything that I do, especially teaching my kids. So I just should always be reading. But I was having a hard time because up to this point, I've almost always been in some sort of a group, some sort of a book club or a class or something like that that really carries me forward and helps me stay motivated because I know at this date we're going to be discussing this book. And so I have that sort of outside motivation to get stuff done. And a lot of times they will come with their own book lists as well. So I feel like, hey, I trust these people, or this is helping me move toward learning something that I feel is really important. And I have the list of books that's pushing me in that direction. And I pretty much was done with that this year. And I was really discouraged and feeling like I don't know what to do. And I tried several different things. And then I finally came across something at the beginning of January. And it's by the Schole sisters, I think is how you say it. It's Schole sisters. And I honestly don't know what Schole stands for. It's something about scholarship, I think. I don't know. But they are just this wonderful group of women who get together and do online book discussions. And I'd been listening to them for a while and I thought that's cool, but what am I going to do? Go read the books that you already read? I just don't know. And then they came up with this thing at the beginning of January called the 5x5 challenge. And my immediate take on this is that it sounded like some sort of a grid. And I thought, okay, I like math, whatever, that sounds cool. And so I listened to their challenge, and it is this epic and incredibly difficult challenge. And I really thought I can't do it. But I want to tell you, I'm trying to organize my videos a little bit better so they're easier to understand. Here's what we're going to go over. I'm going to talk about why I read in the first place, what the 5x5 challenge is, the subjects that I'm choosing to do, and the books inside each of those subjects. So here's the deal. I think that we're all really good at taking care of ourselves, or at least being aware that we need to take care of ourselves physically. We need to eat healthy, drink enough water, exercise, get enough sleep. We all kind of know how to take care of ourselves physically. And I feel like the other areas we're not necessarily as good at, like how do we take care of ourselves socially or emotionally or spiritually? These areas take a little bit more effort to try to figure out. But one of the areas that I think is like the weakest thing that we are just really bad at doing is how to take care of ourselves mentally, especially when we're moms and we're either working or we're at home with a whole lot of kids and we feel like there's just no time to be doing this, or I don't know what to do, I don't know what to read, or even if I read it, I'm not sure what I'm learning from what I'm reading. And so it feels just monumentally hard, just too big, too much, I can't do it. And so for a really long time, all that I read was a lot of fiction because I like to read and I like the stories, but I remember getting to a point where I was walking down the aisles of the library and looking at the books and feeling kind of disgusted and really disappointed because I thought, I have read everything. I've read all of these books. Now, that is not true. I have not read every single book in the library, but I really kind of felt like I'd read everything that I was interested in, that there was nothing left in the genres that I was curious about that I had not already read at least once. And I was really frustrated by that. And it took me a long time to realize that there were more books that I could read. And when I finally decided to start homeschooling my kids, that's when I really broke out into, oh my goodness, I can't just read fiction. I need to read other things so that I have a clue about anything so I can teach my kids anything. And that's when I really started reading other books that were beyond just fluff novels. And what I found was that this created it filled a hunger and a need inside of me that I didn't even know was there. I felt like, yeah, I'm bored, but being a mom with young kids is boring. I just kind of assumed those were the same things. But what was happening was I was not being mentally challenged. I was not reading books that was causing me to stretch and grow. And I think it's Mortimer Adler that said, if we don't ever read books that are above our head, then we condemn our brain to its current low altitude. And I think, yeah, that's what I was doing. I was just on this level that was comfortable for me and I was never stretching or growing. And so I really felt all the time bored. And so when I first started reading the harder books, and it was a slow slow progression, right? But as I started reading that, it started filling that need inside of me and making me feel much more fulfilled and excited about life. So that's why I read. I read not just to fill the time and not just to say, well, it's better than watching a movie. I read because I actually get excited about life. I know more stuff so I can connect with more people. And I find things that the books that I read start talking to themselves inside my head. They start having this conversation that I'm like, oh, wow, I read that in this one book over here and I can see how it relates to this other book over here. And so it starts creating this depth and breadth of knowledge inside me, which is really exciting and just makes me happier. That's my main motivation. It just makes me happier, but it also makes it easier for me to connect with other people because there are just more things that I know about that maybe they know about as well and we can talk about. So let's talk about the 5x5 challenge. This was created by one of the Scully sisters, and just as her own personal idea of what she wanted to do for her personal reading, and then they applied it to all the Scully sisters and they made a video about it. And that's where I came across it. And this idea is that we have certain subjects that we're always sort of leaning toward, and we're either buying books in that area or we're picking books up from that area, and we're either reading them or we're not. And we just kind of are consistently thinking about reading about this subject because it's something we're interested in, but we don't have the time because we're reading other things or we are driving to soccer practice or whatever. It just hasn't become a priority. And so what she did was she said, I want to read both widely and deeply. So I'm going to choose 5 different subjects that I'm already interested in based on the type of books that I'm buying or that I'm already picking up. And I'm going to read inside each of those subjects, I'm going to read 5 different books from different authors and from a different point of view so that I can have more than one story that I'm getting about whatever it is that I'm reading. Now, these ladies are really kind of impressive. The books that they're reading are hard books. They're very deep books. They're challenging books. And I think a lot of the books that I choose are hard and challenging, but they're in subjects that I care about. So I feel like I'm willing to put in the effort, even though they're challenging. So I want to go over what my 5 different subjects are, and then each of the books that I have in those subjects. So remember that these are things that I am interested in. You may look at it and think, that sounds horribly boring, or I've already read that, or I've never even considered that, but I chose these because they just consistently come up in my life. I am interested in these subjects. So the first one is actually just an author, C.S. Lewis. I feel like he has written enough stuff in enough areas that I can get some breadth, even though it's just one author. So he's one of my subjects. Then I'm doing philosophy, religious history, Jewish history, and historical fiction. And you're supposed to have just 5 books in each of these areas. With historical fiction, I couldn't put a cap on it. I just loved it so much. I've got way more than 5 books. I don't know if I'm going to be able to finish all of them, but the list is longer. So here's what I've got. When it comes to the actual books, everything counts. Audiobooks count. I chose several different classes from Hillsdale College that give me kind of an outline and a background on some of the books that I'm reading. That counts. Everything counts. If you're reading it on your own, if you're listening to it, everything counts, right? That's one of the things that I listened to and I thought, I'm willing to do this, is because they weren't so strict about it that I felt like I just don't have time to sit down and read that many books. That it just takes up too much time. But if I can do it in an audiobook, I can get something else done at the same time. So a lot of these do end up being audiobooks for me. So when it comes to C.S. Lewis, here are the books that I'm going to read for him. Surprised by Joy, which is his autobiography. The Four Loves, that he's talking in that about the 4 different types of love that there are in this world. The World's Last Night, I don't know what that's about. Perelandra, and this is the 2nd book in his space trilogy. I've already listened to the 1st book with my son, and so then I listened to Perelandra. At this point in February, I've already listened to Perelandra. I already know what that is about. I'm actually on the 3rd book in his series, which is the next one that I'm going to do, That Hideous Strength, and that is all a part of his space series. It has very little to do with space, but it does. The main character in there does go to Mars, he does go to Venus, and on the last one, That Hideous Strength, he stays on Earth. So it is out in space somewhat, but it's not on a spaceship, right? It's actually land-based on all of them. And it is very theological in nature, that although it is a story going through with a character and actions that they're taking, you're really learning a lot about Christianity through reading it. So I'm reading those, and then I'm also taking a quick class from Hillsdale College called Lewis on Christianity. I've already started that class. It is interesting. it's interesting because it's different from what I thought. I just finished reading Surprised by Joy, which was way more than surprising to me. It was straight up shocking to me. I read that and I was like, wow, this is not the Lewis that I thought I knew. And yet, it has really helped me understand a lot more of his different books. And so reading that and then listening to what the professors at Hillsdale College think about Lewis and what he has to say on Christianity, it's all really giving me a deep breadth and width so that I can understand what's going on when it comes to C.S. Lewis. So that has all been really awesome. I have been hitting that particular subject kind of hard, so I've got more read in that one than I have the other ones. The next one is philosophy. I'm going to be reading Nicomachean Ethics. So what this is it's Aristotle and his son, whose name is Nicomachus. He gathered up his writings and he put them down in a book called Nicomachean Ethics. I'm very curious about it. I want to hear what Aristotle has to say. I'm looking forward to reading that. I haven't read it yet. Aquinas, I'm not going to read the whole book because I just feel like this is getting too heavy. I can't get everything done in 1 year. So I'm just going to read the section that is Man as Moral, which is still chunky and is going to take a little bit of time and effort on my part to be able to work through. I will be taking another class from Hillsdale, Aristotle's Ethics, and it's that book, right? It's Hillsdale's professor's take on that book. So it will give me just a little bit more breadth to understand what I'm working with. And I will also be taking a class from Hillsdale called the Federalist Papers. And in that, I will read all of the Federalist Papers that they are covering. That's going to be hard. I probably need to start that one right away because it's going to be a lot of different Federalist Papers. Have I lost you yet? Are you completely overwhelmed? I'm a little overwhelmed just reading all of this. It feels like a lot, but it's going to take me a year to get through all of these. And then the last one I'm doing there is another class from Hillsdale, Mathematics and Logic, and it will be going over Euclid, so I will probably be reading parts of Euclid's Elements while I'm going through that class. But with those ones, primarily I'm going through the class, and I will read the sections that the class is interested in, whereas with other things, I'm reading the book, like with Lewis, I'm reading all the books, and then I go back and hear what the class has to say to sort of round it out. So philosophy, I know less about, and so I'm leaning more on Hillsdale than I am on C.S. Lewis, which I know a lot more about. So, wherever you are. The next one is religious history. I'm going to be reading two Saints novels, which is the history of the LDS Church, and those are really chunky. Those I have to read 60 pages each time. That's a lot. I will be taking two Hillsdale's classes on that. One is Ancient Christianity, and the other is the Rise and Fall of the Roman Republic. Now, when I first chose to do this, I really wanted to do the fall and decline of the Roman Empire, and I knew it was going to be long, but I thought I could handle it, and I got into it, and I thought, this is really boring, and there's no way I can finish all 6 books, even though this is interesting to me. I want to know about the Roman Empire. I can't do it. It's just too hard. And so maybe in some future year, I will try that again, but this year I said, okay, I'm just going to go take this class on the Roman Republic. So you had the Roman Republic, which rose and fell and was collapsed and became the Roman Empire, which then rose and it fell and collapsed. So the 6-volume series covers the fall and decline of the empire, and the Hillsdale class covers the Republic. So I took the one on the Republic, and that was really interesting. And then to finish that out, I got a book called Byzantium by Judith Herron, and it's the Byzantine Empire, and it's really basically after the Roman Empire has collapsed, then it becomes Byzantium. And so I wanted to learn about this section of history, and I ended up learning about this section and this section, but it's okay, we'll get there. The point is, it's all kind of in the same time frame, and it's all feeding into my next subject that I'm really interested in and kind of giving me context for what's going on in Jewish history. Because I have always been fascinated by Jewish history and how it intertwines with like the whole world. They have been everywhere. They have been kind of abused by everyone. And it's really interesting to me to see how the Jews made it, have survived, and continue to survive in Israel right now. So I'm going to be reading a book called My Name is Asher Lev, and this is by Chaim Poltak. And he wrote the book, The Chosen, which I really enjoyed reading The Chosen. It was a really wonderful book. And so I thought, well, I want to read another book from him from the point of view of a Jew who's living in New York right around World War II. That was The Chosen. And so I think My Name is Asher Lev is in that same time period. I'm not sure. We'll see. And then the next book I'm reading is called The Scout. And I was super duper excited about this because when you read the outline of it, it sounded like it was going to be this amazing adventure story that there are these two guys who are on opposite sides of a war and they're both injured, and so they're in the hospital and they're telling their stories to each other, and in the end of it, it's just you get to have these wonderful insights into the Bedouin tribes, which is where the scout came from, and this other guy, which I guess he's Jewish, I don't really know, because I got it, I was really excited about it, and I started reading it, and I hate it, and it's like there's no plot. It's all these different stories that they're thrown together, and I keep reading the back of it, and I'm like, what? Yes, there are two guys in the hospital, and yes, there are a bunch of different stories, but they never say hello to each other. How am I supposed to know that they're talking to one another and telling these stories? And how do I even know how these stories relate to each other? I don't know. I don't like it, but I bought it. It's on my list. I'm gonna finish it, and it's tiny, so it shouldn't be that hard. And I want to also read The Jews in Their Land by Ben-Gurion, which, man, you want to find someone central to that story. It's Ben-Gurion, so I'm going to read his. Israel, A History by Martin Gilbert and Righteous Victims. And that Righteous Victims covers both the Jewish history and the Muslim history so that you can see both sides of that. And so I'm excited about that as well. So then historical fiction. This is the one where I have a lot. So I found a couple of books by H.B. Moore, and I like her on the whole. I really like the books that she does. So I read Paper Daughters of Chinatown. I'm just going to give you the list and then I'll go back and tell you what they are about. Paper Daughters of Chinatown, The Slow March of Light, Land Divided, A New Dawn, Fire and Steel, books 1 through 6, Imperium, Lustrum, Dictator, and One in Thine Hand. Okay, so let me break that down. Paper Daughters of Chinatown and The Slow March of Light are both written by H.B. Moore. And her name is Heather B. Moore, I think. I don't remember what the B stands for. But she, The Paper Daughters of Chinatown was a really interesting book about these girls. The laws were set up in such a way in early 1900s in Los Angeles that Chinese women could not come to America. That the men could come, and I can't remember the exact details of why, but there was something about the way the law was written that they couldn't bring their wives, and therefore there were no families. There was just not a family dynamic. And so into this hole, this void of family, they brought a lot of young girls as prostitutes, and they kidnapped them, and they created false paper trails for them, and they brought them in under false pretenses, and the girls had no idea what was going on, and they, the girls were lied to. They were told that you're going to have this husband here for you in America, and we'll give your family all this money in China, and then you can come over here and be happy in America. And they bring them here, and all the bad things, drugs, and they sold them, they beat them. It was horrible. And into this absolute disaster of a situation, there was a group of women who said, we're going to set up a home where we will bring all of these Chinese women in and help them heal. And not just, hey, if you come to us, but the word got out on the street that these women would come and rescue them. And so these girls would send a message, please come get me. And so they would go and they would walk down into Chinatown where it was just this cesspool of nastiness, and they would break down the door. They had some police officers who would come with them in their off hours. They weren't getting paid or anything. They were just doing it because they felt like this was the right thing to do. And so they would break down the doors. They would go in, they would grab these girls who had asked to be rescued, and they would bring them to the house. And most of the girls stayed, some couldn't because they were so addicted to the drugs that they went back to their old life. They said, I just can't make the break. Some of them, they lost the battle in court, that their slave owners would lie, and the court system was corrupt. Or maybe we can give it the benefit of the doubt and say they didn't really know what was going on, but I think they were corrupt. And they just said, oh, you're her uncle or you're her husband or whatever. Well, then you have the right over her. And then legally they were able to take that girl and put her back into slavery. So there were some losses, but there were also incredible wins. And it went over this woman's entire life. She just spent her whole life rescuing these women and helping them to heal. And the healing process wasn't pretty. You've got people who are are dealing with addictions and dealing with abuse and dealing with, some of them are pregnant. And, it was just a really big mess and kind of ugly, but she walked them through that process with a really loving and calm attitude. And she was able to create a safe place for all of these women to really heal. And some of them went on to college, and they moved out and they got married, and they had lives that were productive and wonderful after they'd had some time to heal. A really fascinating story, and a really powerful woman who really put her life on the line there several times. That's Paper Daughters of Chinatown. And that is really the only one that I've read in the historical fiction. She also wrote The Slow March of Light, and that has something to do with World War II. I can't remember, something about, I haven't read that one yet. Robert Markham wrote the next two books called Land Divided and A New Dawn. And this is a Jewish historical fiction where they had I think they follow one lady's life where she was in a concentration camp, and then she came over to Israel and was living in Israel right when the United Nations is declaring that it is actually a country and that the Jews own it and they can come and they can move in here. And all that happened then, the war and the uprising and everything that is happening that's making it so very difficult for them to live there, you get to see it through this historical fiction account and see how they're responding when you have to live in the houses that are getting bombed. And it is an interesting story. Fire and Steel is a series by Gerald Lund. I have started it, but I haven't gotten in enough to even really talk about it very much. It has to do with World War II, follows a German family and an American family, and I imagine they both have people who go to war, and you get to follow their stories. I haven't read it yet, I don't know. Then these next three books, Imperium, Lustrum, and Dictator, those are all books by Robert Harris, and they follow Cicero. So again, this is Rome. A lot of these historical fiction books, I chose them because they reflect the other types of books that I'm reading. And so these guys are following the story of Cicero, who was a senator, I believe, in Rome, and had a lot of influence over the type of government that was taking place in Rome. He was very influential. And so I haven't read these particular books by Robert Harris. I have read another one that followed the Jewish spy, and that was so fascinating, seeing what was going on there and all of the outrage that took place there, and how he wrote his letters to his wife knowing that they were going to be read by his superiors, and in them he's like, I'm innocent and I know they're going to find this this information that will prove me innocent, and they're going to look in these places to find this information. And it took a really long time before anybody said maybe he's not the bad guy, and they started looking into it. So I think I've read maybe some other books by Robert Harris as well that I can't remember, but I remember being so impressed by that story. So I'm looking forward to reading his books on Cicero. And then One in Thine Hand is a book, again, about Jerusalem, and it follows the story of an American. I've already read this one, so I may not read it again, but this American is, after the Vietnam War, he's lost, he doesn't know what to do with his life, he gets on a plane and decides he wants to go to Jerusalem. I don't know why. That seems like a jump, but that's what he decides to do. So as he's going over, he meets this Arab, and I can't remember his name either. It's been a while since I've read this. But this Arab sits down next to him and wants to be his friend, and is actually just this really great guy. And they end up being really close friends throughout the whole story. And then he gets to Jerusalem, and the hotel's daughter really doesn't like him, but of course they end up really liking each other and falling in love and all of that stuff. But you get to watch, she's a Jew, the friend on the plane is Arab, and then this guy is an American. And you get to watch during the 6-Day War what went down and how it felt to be on the inside while everything was hitting the fan and becoming absolutely insane there. So that's just one more look into the Jewish history and what it's like to actually be on the ground and not always from the outside looking in. Although it was written by somebody from the outside looking in, that's why you read lots of books, so that you can have a lot of different takes on the same subject. So here's the thing, I don't know how you felt about that. If you thought that sounds interesting or overwhelming, or if you've all clicked off and I'm the only one still here, I don't know. But I know that when I look through those books, I feel like, are you kidding me? Like, this is too hard. That's too many books. They're too big. I can't do it. That's ludicrous. But there were 3 things that they said in this 5x5 challenge that really made me stop and consider and say, no, I think I actually do want to do this. Even though it sounds really hard, this is something that I'm excited about. And the first thing they said was, I mentioned it before, everything counts. If you're reading to your kids some sort of family read, which we do, then I'm going to count those books. And if that gets me to 25, then it gets me to 25 and I made it. The other thing is, she said, mix it up on difficulty. Don't have huge books in every single area. That's just too hard. And that's why I dropped The Fall and Decline of the Roman Empire. It's too big. I can't take it on at this point. And I may find as I go on that I've got several other books that are too big. But you know, it enables me to change it up, and I can choose what I want to do. These are subjects that I want to do. The last thing that they said really made a big difference in my life was that they said, you know, when you're a mom and your kids are getting older, there's going to come a point academically where you sort of hand them off to other mentors, where you say, while you're really interested in a subject that is beyond my ability to do because I don't know very much about that subject, so I'm going to outsource and find you another mentor. That's great. There's nothing wrong with that. That's what being a parent mentor really is about. As your kids get older, it's just finding other mentors to bring into them. But those mentors are going to come and go. You as a parent mentor are going to stay in your child's life forever. And you are completely able to mentor a 3-year-old, right? It takes like a 19, 20-year-old can mentor a 3-year-old. We are capable of doing that. But as your kids get older and they start having harder questions and more difficult things that they're running into, if I don't increase the depth and the breadth of my learning, then I will not be really prepared to be the kind of mentor that I can say, hey, I have a clue. I have an idea of what needs to happen in this situation to get to a successful outcome. And if I don't put in the effort right now, I won't be able to continue to be that kind of a parent mentor. And that never ever occurred to me, that I need to continue learning so that I can continue being a good parent mentor. And so that has been really motivating for me. Now, when my 20-year-old heard that, he was like, great, does that mean you're going to start reading all these coding books with me? I said, no, it does not, because I don't have to read stuff that they are interested in. The fact is, when I'm learning, I'm more excited about them learning. I'm more excited about life in general, and I have more to talk about just in general. It doesn't have to be specific stuff that they are interested in. I'm the parent mentor. I'm not necessarily the subject mentor. And so he's still going to find people who can teach him how to code and do great on that. But I will continue to be a really good lifetime mentor because of the types of books that I'm choosing to read and because I'm excited about learning still. So that was big for me, knowing that I'm not just doing this because I'm bored or I need something going on in my life. I'm doing it for a really deep, meaningful purpose, and my kids need me to show up in all the different ways, and this is one of the ways that I can continue to be a very positive influence in their life. Okay, and I just want to touch on one more thing, and this may not be a problem for you because I don't know how you read. You may, if you want to do this challenge or not, and you just do a different thing, you may read where you have like a book and you start it, and then as soon as you're done, you go read another book. This is not how I read. I read lots of books all the time. I can only make it so far in a certain book, like That Hideous Strength, before I'm like, turn it off. I'm just going to need a couple of days to process that because that is one weird book. It really is hard to understand. But then as I let it sit for a couple of days, I actually am making connections in that particular book that I could not make immediately upon reading it, that I just felt like, Merlin? You've got this couple that's having a hard time being married, and they're both intellectuals, and then he goes off into the most psychotic company ever, and then she goes off and she meets these other almost cult type people, but they're really sweet, and then Merlin? I just feel like, what is this book about? This is so confusing. And then I let it sit for a couple of days, and then I started making connections in my head, and I was like, oh, that's why, because they're showing contrast the whole time. They're being able to say the conversations that they're having over here in the bad guys camp are directly opposed to the conversations that they're having over here in the good guys camp. And it's not just that the subjects are opposite. It's almost like they're talking about the same subject, but they're doing it in a way that you can see, oh, that's how a bad guy would see that subject. That's how a bad guy sees marriage. And this is how a good guy sees marriage. That's how you treat your husband. That's how you treat your wife, and vice versa. But they do it obliquely enough that it took me a couple of days to be able to see that. So anyway, my point is I have to have several books going on at the same time so that I can set one down and pick another up and do something else. And as a result, having these 25 to 30 books that I'm doing, I'm just not sure. I don't want to get to December and say, oh, I need to read 10 more books. I'm not going to make it. So here's what I've done. I don't know if this is going to work, but I'm trying to make it work. I've looked at every single book and said, I can handle reading about this many pages in this book based on how dense it is. So if it's going to be historical fiction, I can totally handle 80 pages a day. That's going to be something that I can do, no problem. But if I'm reading a really heavy Nicomachean Ethics, probably 20 is all I can handle because there's going to be a lot of stopping and reading, maybe even 10, right? So each one has a different number of pages, but I'm hoping to put in about an hour every single day on each subject. And so I made a big journal and I'm keeping track of everything, and where I'm just saying, as long as I'm doing what works out to be about 30 readings per month, it works out. Whatever book I'm reading from, as long as I'm taking that chunk of that book. So if I say, well, in Nicomachean Ethics, I need to be reading 13 pages every time I pick it up. If I read 13 pages, that counts as one day. If later that day I'm going to bed and I read some out of a fictional novel, that counts as another day, right? So I get 2 because I did 2 readings in one day. And that has had to happen a lot because I didn't start reading until the end of January, and then I got really sick and couldn't read for several days. So it has been a sprint and stop several times, but that's why I have the journal, so that I can sort of keep track of it and say I'm still on track, even though I'm like, there are just so many books and I'm doing them as I go. That's how I'm able to keep track and say, yeah, but I'm reading 30 different times, 30 different chunks from these books every single month. I'm good to go. I'm going to finish on the time. So I know that was a lot. I know that was a lot of really specific stuff, but I just wanted to put out there, this is what I'm doing for my own learning. And it's the first time in a really long time that I've taken on my own education without a lot of outside help, without anybody holding me to account. And it has been a little hard. You know, some of the books that I've read, like The Scout, I'm really disappointed in. And then other books I've been really excited about and just buzzed through, like the Paper Daughters of Chinatown. Man, I'd never even heard of that before. So fascinating, really enjoyed it. So I imagine there's going to be a lot of that throughout the year. But it just really makes me happy to be able to learn and to create those connections with other people and with history, right? That's one of the things that was said in That Hideous Strength that Mark, who's the protagonist, who's making just terrible decisions, the author, C.S. Lewis, says, well, you know, in his defense, he never had either a classical education or a hard knocks education. All he got was a modern education, and therefore he didn't have the character required to be able to succeed in this tough situation. And I thought, oh my goodness, that's so true. And I don't want to be in that situation. So I want to give myself a better education so that when I get in tough situations, I have something to draw on and say, I can handle this because I've seen the long view. I've heard other heroes. I know how people handle tough things. I can do this too. So lots and lots of information there. I hope this is helpful. I hope that you made it to the end. If you have, you're amazing. Thank you so much. Being a mom, being a dad really matters, and you are doing much better than you think you are. Keep it up, and I will see you on the next one.